The radio crackled to life in the middle of the vast New Mexico desert. A trucker's voice cut through the static. He sounded shaky and confused. "I'm on Highway 491, about 30 miles north of Gallup. I need to report something. There's a car following me, but it's not normal. It's not touching the ground. The headlights are too bright. They're burning my eyes through the mirror." The dispatcher asked him to explain more. The trucker's voice grew more scared. "I've been driving this route for 15 years. I know what cars look like. This isn't a car anymore." The radio went silent. When state police arrived at the spot the trucker had given them, they found his big truck parked on the side of the road. The engine was still running. The driver's door hung open. Inside, a half-empty coffee cup sat on the dashboard. It was still warm. The trucker was never found. This stretch of highway has collected more stories like this than any other road in America. For decades, it was known by a different number, a number that carried so much fear that the government changed it. But changing numbers on signs doesn't change what happens on the road after dark. This is the story of America's most haunted highway, the road that was once called Route 666. In 1926, the government created the numbered highway system. These roads would connect America from coast to coast. Route 66 became the most famous. It stretched from Chicago to Los Angeles. But there was another route that split off from its famous parent. Route 666 began in Gallup, New Mexico. It snaked north through Colorado and Utah. It ended in Monticello. The highway served mining towns and trading posts. These places were scattered across some of the loneliest land in America. It passed through the heart of the Navajo Nation. Here, old beliefs about spirits and ghosts ran deep in the red earth. From the beginning, Route 666 seemed cursed by its very name. The number 666 has been linked with evil in Christian tradition for centuries. It appears in the Book of Revelation as the mark of the beast. Highway planners probably chose the number simply because it was the sixth branch off Route 66. But locals right away called it the Devil's Highway. The bad luck might have stayed just folklore. But strange things began happening along the route almost from the day it opened. Car crashes on Route 666 happened more often than on similar highways. Not just small accidents or normal road problems. Deadly crashes happened far too often, many times under circumstances that made no sense. State traffic records from the 1940s and 1950s show patterns that worried safety officials. Single car accidents, where drivers said they swerved to avoid something in the road, but investigators found no obstacles. Head-on crashes where both drivers swore the other car had been driving with no headlights. This made it invisible until the last second. More troubling were the people who vanished. Cars found empty with engines running, personal things untouched. No sign of the people who had been driving. Some were found days or weeks later. They wandered in the desert with no memory of how they got there. Others were never seen again. The Navajo Nation had their own reasons for the strange events. Much of Route 666 passed through their territory. Tribal elders spoke of skinwalkers. These were shape-shifting beings that could take the form of animals or even cars. According to Navajo tradition, these creatures were once human medicine men. They had turned to dark magic. They were said to hunt the highways at night. They looked for victims to steal their life force. Traditional Navajo teachings said certain places were spiritually dangerous. In these spots, the wall between the physical world and the spirit world was thin. Route 666 passed right through several of these areas. Medicine men warned their people to avoid the highway after sunset. This was especially true during certain moon phases. But it wasn't just Native Americans who met the supernatural along Route 666. Truckers, traveling salesmen, and tourists from all backgrounds reported encounters. These were things they struggled to explain or forget. In 1961, a family was driving from Denver to Phoenix. They stopped at a gas station in Shiprock, New Mexico. The attendant was a local Navajo man. He noticed their Colorado license plates. He asked about their route. When they said they were taking 666 south, his face changed. He warned them to stay on the main road. He told them not to stop until they reached Gallup, no matter what they saw or heard. The family thought he was being too dramatic. They had been driving for hours. They planned to camp somewhere along the route to save money on hotels. About 50 miles south of Shiprock, they found a dirt road. It led to what looked like a good camping spot near some rock formations. They set up their tent as the sun was setting. The father built a small campfire while the mother made dinner. Their 2 children were 8 and 10 years old. They played nearby. As darkness fell, the family sat around the fire to eat. The first sign something was wrong came when the children noticed the silence. No insects buzzing, no night birds calling, no rustle of small animals in the brush. The desert had gone completely quiet. Even the wind had stopped. Then they heard the singing. It was a human voice, but unlike any singing they had ever heard. The tune was haunting and went on and on. It echoed off the rock walls around them. The words, if they were words, were in a language none of them knew. The voice seemed to come from different directions, as if the singer was moving in a circle around their camp. The father grabbed a flashlight. He shone it toward the sound. The beam showed nothing but empty desert and red rock, but the singing continued. It grew louder and more urgent. The children huddled close to their mother. She had started pulling sleeping bags and camping gear toward the car. The singing stopped suddenly. In the silence that followed, they heard footsteps, not the soft sound of bare feet, not the crunch of boots on sand. These footsteps sounded like hooves on stone. They moved in a careful circle around their campsite. The father packed everything into the car as fast as he could. As they drove back toward Route 666, the headlights lit up a figure standing beside the road. It looked like a man in traditional Native American clothing, but something about his posture was wrong. His head was tilted at an impossible angle. His arms hung too long at his sides. They drove past without stopping. In the rearview mirror, the father saw the figure begin to follow their car, not running, but moving with an odd, jumping walk. This somehow kept pace with their car, even as he sped up to 60 miles per hour. The figure chased them for nearly 10 miles. It finally fell behind and disappeared into the darkness. The family drove straight through to Phoenix. They stopped only for gas and never went camping again. Similar encounters grew more common throughout the 1960s and 1970s. Motorists reported being followed by mysterious cars that seemed to have no drivers. Others described seeing massive animals crossing the road. These beasts looked like wolves or coyotes but were far too large. They moved on their back legs like humans. A common theme in many stories was phantom hitchhikers. Drivers would spot a figure walking along the side of Route 666, usually a young woman or an elderly Native American man. When they stopped to offer a ride, the hitchhiker would get into the car. They would give directions to a nearby town, but when the driver reached the destination, they would turn to find the back seat empty. Local police got dozens of reports from confused drivers. They insisted they had picked up passengers who had simply vanished from their cars. In some cases, the descriptions of the hitchhikers matched missing person reports from decades earlier. One of the best documented cases happened in 1975. A traveling salesman named Robert Hayes was driving north on Route 666 toward Cortez, Colorado. Near the town of Teak Nos Pos, he spotted an elderly Navajo man walking along the highway. The man wore traditional clothing. He seemed to be struggling in the heat. Hayes pulled over and offered a ride. The man climbed into the passenger seat. He spoke softly in accented English. He asked to be taken to his grandson's house in Cortez. He gave specific directions. He mentioned street names and landmarks. During the drive, the old man told Hayes stories about the area. He described how the land had changed over his lifetime. He talked about the building of Route 666. He said it had disturbed sacred sites. He warned Hayes to be careful driving the highway at night. He said some spirits were angry about the intrusion. When they reached Cortez, the old man directed Hayes to a small house on the edge of town. Hayes pulled into the driveway. He turned to thank his passenger, but the seat was empty. Confused, he checked the back seat and looked outside the car. The old man was nowhere to be seen. Hayes knocked on the door of the house. A middle-aged Navajo man answered. Hayes explained what had happened. The man's face grew serious as he listened to the description of his passenger. He invited Hayes inside. He showed him a photograph on the mantelpiece. It was the same face Hayes had seen in his car. The man in the photograph was the homeowner's grandfather. He had died in 1963. He was buried in the cemetery outside Teak Nos Pos. This was exactly where Hayes had picked up his hitchhiker. By the 1980s, Route 666 had earned a reputation as the most dangerous highway in America. Insurance companies began charging higher rates for cars that regularly traveled the route. Some trucking companies told their drivers to take other routes, even if it meant adding hours to their trips. The supernatural activity seemed to get stronger as more traffic used the road. Motorists reported more frequent sightings of ghostly cars that would pace their vehicles for miles before vanishing. The phantom hitchhikers appeared almost every night during certain seasons. New, strange things began happening that defied any earthly explanation. Drivers described seeing enormous black dogs running alongside their cars. These creatures kept pace at highway speeds. These creatures were far larger than any known species. They had glowing red eyes and fur that seemed to absorb light. They would run next to cars for miles. Sometimes they would leap across the road with impossible grace. Others reported encounters with what they called shadow people, dark figures that would dart across the highway just beyond the reach of headlights. These beings moved with fluid, unnatural motion, as if they were made of smoke or liquid darkness. They appeared to be roughly human-shaped, but stretched and twisted. They had long limbs and heads that seemed too large for their bodies. The most disturbing reports came from drivers who said their cars had been boarded by unseen beings. They would feel the car shake, as if something heavy had jumped onto the roof or hood. Scratching sounds would echo from above, like claws scraping against metal. Some drivers reported seeing handprints appear on their windows from the inside, as if invisible passengers were pressing against the glass. In 1982, a truck driver named Frank Martinez was hauling freight from Albuquerque to Denver. He had driven Route 666 hundreds of times over his 20-year career. He knew every curve and hill on the highway. Around 2 a.m., about 40 miles north of Gallup, his CB radio started picking up strange signals. At first, it sounded like normal chatter from other truckers, but as he listened more closely, he realized the voices were speaking backwards. The words were clear, but they were in reverse order, as if someone had recorded normal speech and played it backwards. Martinez tried to respond, but his radio wouldn't transmit. The strange voices continued for nearly an hour. They seemed to be having conversations, but the backwards speech made it impossible to understand what they were saying. Then his truck's engine began to sputter. The headlights dimmed and flickered. The speedometer needle started swinging wildly, even though he was maintaining steady speed. The temperature gauge showed the engine was overheating, but steam wasn't coming from under the hood. As he crested a hill, Martinez saw headlights approaching from behind. The vehicle was gaining rapidly. It was moving much faster than seemed safe on the winding highway. Martinez moved to the right to let it pass, but the other vehicle slowed to match his speed instead of passing. For the next 30 miles, the mysterious car followed exactly 100 feet behind his truck. Its headlights were unusually bright. They flooded the interior of Martinez's cab with harsh white light. When he tried to get a look at the vehicle in his mirrors, the light was too intense to make out any details. Martinez tried various tests to see if this was coincidental. He slowed down and the following car slowed as well. He sped up and it sped up. He signaled left, then right, then left again. The car behind him repeated every signal perfectly. This bizarre convoy continued for over an hour. The temperature in his cab dropped noticeably, even though the heater was running. The backwards voices on the CB radio grew louder and more frantic. Martinez began to feel a deep sense of dread that he couldn't explain. Finally, he spotted the lights of a truck stop ahead. He signaled and pulled into the parking lot. He expected the following car to continue past on the highway. Instead, it followed him into the lot and parked directly behind his truck. Martinez sat in his cab, afraid to get out. Through the glare of the headlights, he could see the outline of the other vehicle, but he couldn't make out any people inside. The car appeared to be an older model, possibly from the 1950s. It had a high profile and rounded edges. After several minutes, Martinez decided he needed to go inside the truck stop for help. As he opened his door, the headlights of the following car suddenly went out. In the darkness, he could no longer see the vehicle at all. He hurried into the truck stop. He found only one employee working the night shift. When he explained what had happened, the man looked out the window toward his truck. The parking lot behind his vehicle was empty. The employee was a local resident who had worked at the truck stop for 12 years. He was not surprised by Martinez's story. He said similar encounters were reported regularly along Route 666. Drivers would be followed by phantom vehicles that would vanish the moment they reached populated areas. He showed Martinez a notebook where he recorded unusual incidents reported by customers. The entries stretched back years. They described remarkably similar encounters. Mysterious cars that followed travelers for miles, always maintaining the same distance, always disappearing when witnesses tried to interact with them. The truck stop employee recommended Martinez wait until dawn before continuing his trip. He explained that the strange activity along Route 666 was almost always limited to nighttime hours. Whatever forces were responsible seemed to avoid daylight. Martinez spent the rest of the night in the truck stop restaurant. He drank coffee and listened to other travelers share their own stories about the highway. By sunrise, he had heard accounts of phantom hitchhikers, shadow creatures, and vehicles that defied the laws of physics. When he finally returned to his truck, he found strange marks on the trailer and rear bumper. The scratches looked like they had been made by fingernails or claws. They were gouged deep into the metal. But there were no matching marks in the dust around the truck, as if whatever had made them had not touched the ground. In 1985, an incident occurred that would become one of the most documented supernatural encounters in Route 666's history. A young couple, Michael and Sarah Thompson, were driving from Albuquerque to visit relatives in Utah. They had left late in the evening. They were traveling north on Route 666 around midnight. About 30 miles north of Gallup, their car began having mechanical problems. The engine started misfiring. The headlights flickered on and off. Michael pulled over to check under the hood. Everything appeared normal. When he tried to restart the car, the engine turned over smoothly. They continued driving, but the problems kept happening. The radio began picking up strange signals that sounded like voices speaking in reverse. The speedometer needle would swing wildly even when they kept steady speed. Most unsettling, the temperature inside the car dropped noticeably. This happened even though the heater was running. As they went over a hill, they saw headlights approaching from behind. The vehicle was gaining rapidly. It was moving much faster than seemed safe on the winding highway. Michael moved to the right to allow it to pass, but the other vehicle slowed to match their speed instead of passing them. For the next several miles, the mysterious car followed exactly 50 feet behind them. Its headlights were unusually bright. They flooded the interior of the Thompsons' car with harsh white light. When Michael tried to get a look at the vehicle in his mirrors, the light was too intense to make out any details. Sarah suggested they pull over and let the other car pass. But when Michael slowed down, the following vehicle slowed as well. When he sped up, it sped up. The driver seemed determined to maintain the exact same distance. Growing nervous, Michael decided to test whether this was coincidental. He tapped his brakes several times in a row. The following car copied his movements perfectly. Its brake lights flashed in the same pattern. He signaled left, then right, then left again. The car behind them repeated every signal. For nearly 20 miles, this bizarre convoy continued. The temperature in their car dropped even further. Their breath began to fog. The radio dissolved into static, then went completely silent. Even more disturbing, they realized they hadn't seen any other traffic for over an hour. This was despite being on a major highway. Finally, Michael spotted the lights of a truck stop ahead. He signaled and pulled into the parking lot. He expected the following car to continue past. Instead, it followed them into the lot and parked directly behind them. Michael and Sarah sat in their car, afraid to get out. Through the glare of the headlights, they could see the outline of the other vehicle, but they couldn't make out any people inside. The car appeared to be an older model, possibly from the 1950s. It had a high profile and rounded edges. After several minutes, Michael decided they needed to go inside the truck stop for help. As they opened their doors, the headlights of the following car suddenly went out. In the darkness, they could no longer see the vehicle at all. They hurried into the truck stop. They found only one employee working the night shift. When they explained what had happened, the man looked out the window toward their car. The parking lot behind their vehicle was empty. The employee was a local resident who had worked at the truck stop for 15 years. He was not surprised by their story. He told them that similar encounters were reported regularly along Route 666. Drivers would be followed by phantom vehicles that would vanish the moment they reached populated areas. He showed them a logbook where he recorded unusual incidents reported by customers. The entries stretched back years. They described remarkably similar encounters, mysterious cars that followed travelers for miles, always maintaining the same distance, always disappearing when witnesses tried to interact with them. The truck stop employee recommended they wait until dawn before continuing their trip. He explained that the strange activity along Route 666 was almost always limited to nighttime hours. Whatever forces were responsible seemed to avoid daylight. Michael and Sarah spent the rest of the night in the truck stop restaurant. They drank coffee and listened to other travelers share their own stories about the highway. By sunrise, they had heard accounts of phantom hitchhikers, shadow creatures, and vehicles that defied the laws of physics. When they finally returned to their car, they found strange marks on the trunk and rear bumper. The scratches looked like they had been made by fingernails or claws. They were gouged deep into the metal. But there were no matching marks in the dust around the car, as if whatever had made them had not touched the ground. As reports of supernatural activity continued to mount throughout the 1980s and 1990s, pressure grew on government officials to address the situation. While they couldn't officially acknowledge the paranormal aspects, they couldn't ignore the reality. Route 666 had higher accident rates and more missing person cases than similar highways. Local law enforcement agencies struggled to investigate incidents that seemed to have no logical explanation. Police reports from the era read like science fiction. They were filled with witness statements about impossible things, evidence that went against known laws of physics. In many cases, officers found themselves filing reports they knew their bosses would find hard to believe. Abandoned vehicles with no mechanical problems and no signs of crime. Accident scenes where the physical evidence didn't match witness testimony. Missing person cases where people seemed to have simply vanished from their cars while driving. Detective Maria Rodriguez worked for the New Mexico State Police for 23 years. She investigated dozens of cases along Route 666. In a 1997 interview, she described the frustration of trying to solve cases that defied explanation. "We would find a car on the side of the road," Rodriguez said, "engine running, keys in the ignition, purse and wallet on the seat. No signs of struggle, no mechanical problems, no reason for the driver to abandon the vehicle. We would search for miles in every direction and find nothing." She described one case where a family of 4 disappeared from their car while driving to Colorado. The vehicle was found the next morning, still running, parked neatly at a scenic overlook. All the family's belongings were inside, including their wallets and a cooler full of food. The doors were unlocked, but there were no footprints in the soft sand around the car. "We brought in search and rescue teams, helicopters, tracking dogs," Rodriguez said. "We searched for weeks. It was like they had been lifted straight up into the sky." The family was never found. The Navajo Nation took a more direct approach to the problem. Tribal officials worked with medicine men to perform cleansing ceremonies along portions of the highway that passed through reservation land. They put up protective symbols at key locations. They advised tribal members to carry traditional safeguards when traveling the route. Some of these ceremonies appeared to have temporary effects. Reports of supernatural activity would decrease in treated areas for weeks or months following the rituals, but the effects never lasted permanently. The strange things would eventually return with the same intensity as before. Thomas Begay, a Navajo medicine man, explained the tribal perspective on the highway's problems. "The road was built through sacred places," he said in a 1995 interview. "It cut through burial grounds and ceremonial sites. It disturbed the balance between the physical world and the spirit world." Begay said the skinwalkers and other supernatural beings were not evil spirits trying to harm people. They were guardians of the sacred sites, responding to the intrusion of the highway. "They are trying to protect what is holy," he said, "but their methods frighten people who don't understand." He explained that traditional Navajo knowledge included ways to travel safely through spiritually active areas. These involved specific prayers, protective items, and respectful behavior. But most highway travelers were unaware of these traditions. "The spirits don't distinguish between those who respect the land and those who don't," Begay said. "They see all travelers as intruders." By the late 1990s, the negative publicity surrounding Route 666 was affecting tourism and business development in the region. Business leaders and local politicians began lobbying for a solution that would restore confidence in the highway. The number 666 had become such a liability that some people refused to drive the route at all. Hotels and restaurants along the highway reported decreased business, especially from tourists who were aware of its supernatural reputation. In 2003, the federal government officially changed Route 666 to Highway 491. The new number honored the 491st Bombardment Group that had served in World War II. The change required replacing hundreds of road signs and updating thousands of maps and GPS systems. Officials hoped that removing the satanic associations of the number 666 would help dispel the supernatural reputation of the highway. Public statements emphasized the patriotic significance of the new designation. They highlighted the honor it brought to military veterans, but changing the numbers on road signs proved insufficient to alter the fundamental character of the highway. Reports of paranormal activity continued along the newly designated Highway 491. This suggested that whatever forces were at work were not deterred by administrative changes. The phantom vehicles still appeared in travelers' mirrors. The shadow creatures still darted across the asphalt in the pre-dawn hours. The ghostly hitchhikers still flagged down rides to destinations where they would mysteriously vanish. Modern technology has provided new ways to document the strange things along the former Route 666. Dashboard cameras have captured footage of mysterious lights and unexplained shapes moving near the highway. GPS devices sometimes malfunction in specific locations. They show impossible coordinates or indicate that vehicles are traveling at speeds they couldn't possibly achieve. Cell phone towers have enabled more immediate reporting of incidents, but they have also revealed new mysteries. Emergency dispatchers receive calls from the highway where the caller claims to be in distress. But when rescue teams arrive at the reported coordinates, they find no trace of vehicles or people. Some of these calls appear to be coming from phone numbers that were disconnected years earlier. Others come from devices that GPS tracking shows are located miles from where the callers claim to be. In a few cases, the voices on emergency calls have been identified as belonging to people who disappeared along the highway decades ago. In 2019, a 911 dispatcher in Gallup received a call that illustrated this strange phenomenon. The caller was a woman who said her car had broken down on Highway 491. She gave specific mile markers and described nearby landmarks. She sounded frightened and said something was following her. The dispatcher sent state police to the location immediately, but when they arrived, they found no broken-down car and no sign of anyone in distress. The dispatcher called the phone number back, but it had been disconnected. Later investigation revealed that the phone number had belonged to a woman named Jennifer Walsh. She had disappeared along Route 666 in 1987. Her car was found abandoned, but she was never seen again. The voice on the 911 call matched recordings of Walsh from interviews she had given to local news stations before her disappearance. The internet has allowed witnesses to share their experiences more widely. This has revealed patterns that were previously hidden. Online forums dedicated to the paranormal activity along Highway 491 contain hundreds of first-hand accounts. These describe remarkably consistent things. The consistency of these reports across decades is striking. They come from witnesses with no connection to each other. This suggests that something genuinely unusual is occurring along this stretch of highway. The experiences are too similar and too detailed to be explained away as folklore or suggestion. Researchers have proposed various theories to explain the supernatural activity along the former Route 666. Some point to the area's geological features. They suggest that unusual magnetic fields or underground mineral deposits might create conditions that affect human perception. These same forces might interfere with electronic devices. Dr. William Stevens, a geologist at the University of New Mexico, has studied the mineral composition of the area around Highway 491. He found unusually high concentrations of magnetite and other magnetic minerals in the rock formations near the highway. These minerals can create localized magnetic anomalies. Stevens explained in a 2018 research paper. Such anomalies might affect navigation equipment, car electronics, and possibly even human brain function. Stevens noted that magnetic fields have been shown to influence human perception and mood in laboratory studies. Strong magnetic fields can cause hallucinations, feelings of dread, and the sensation of an unseen presence. It's possible that the geological features along this highway create conditions that make people more susceptible to unusual experiences, he said. However, Stevens admitted that geology alone couldn't explain all the reported phenomena. The magnetic theory might account for some electronic malfunctions and perceptual effects, he said, but it doesn't explain the consistency of witness reports or the physical evidence left behind. Others focus on the cultural and spiritual significance of the region. The highway passes through areas that have been considered sacred by Native American tribes for centuries. It's possible that the construction and heavy use of the road has disturbed spiritual forces that indigenous peoples have long understood and respected. Paranormal investigators have noted that the most active areas along Highway 491 correspond to locations where the road cuts through or near ancient burial sites. It also passes ceremonial grounds and other places of traditional significance. This correlation suggests that the supernatural activity might be connected to disturbances of sacred sites. Dr. Sarah Martinez, an anthropologist who has studied Navajo spiritual traditions, believes there may be truth to these connections. Traditional knowledge systems often contain practical information about the natural world, she said. When indigenous peoples say certain places are spiritually dangerous, they may be recognizing real phenomena that Western science doesn't yet understand. Martinez pointed out that many cultures around the world have traditions about places where the boundary between worlds is thin. These traditions exist independently in societies that had no contact with each other, she said. That suggests they might be based on genuine observations of natural phenomena. She noted that some locations along Highway 491 have been considered sacred or dangerous by multiple tribes throughout history. When different groups, separated by centuries, all say the same place is spiritually active, that's worth taking seriously, Martinez said. Skeptics argue that the reports are the result of suggestion and expectation. They contend that the highway's reputation creates a psychological environment where ordinary events are interpreted as supernatural. Night driving, fatigue, and the isolated nature of the route could contribute to misperceptions and false memories. Dr. Robert Johnson, a psychologist who specializes in perception and memory, has written extensively about the Route 666 phenomenon. He believes most reports can be explained by known psychological processes. When people expect to see something supernatural, their brains become primed to interpret ambiguous stimuli as confirming those expectations, Johnson explained. A distant car with unusual headlights becomes a ghostly vehicle. Road fatigue and microsleep episodes can create the impression of lost time. Johnson also pointed to the role of social contagion in spreading supernatural beliefs. Stories get shared and embellished over time, he said. People hear these stories and then interpret their own experiences through that lens. He acknowledged that this doesn't explain all aspects of the Highway 491 reports. The physical evidence is harder to dismiss, he said. Scratch marks on vehicles, electromagnetic interference, multiple independent witnesses reporting identical details. These require additional explanation. However, this psychological explanation struggles to account for the physical evidence that accompanies many encounters. Scratch marks on vehicles, electromagnetic interference with electronic devices, and the correlation between reports from independent witnesses suggest that something more than psychology is at work. The debate over Highway 491 reflects broader questions about the nature of reality and the limits of scientific understanding. The experiences reported along this highway challenge conventional explanations. They force us to consider possibilities that lie outside the boundaries of accepted knowledge. For those who travel Highway 491 today, the supernatural reputation remains a powerful influence. Some drivers deliberately avoid the route, especially at night. Others seek it out, hoping to experience the phenomena for themselves. The highway continues to serve the communities along its path. It carries commercial traffic and connects isolated areas to the broader world. But it also continues to generate reports of experiences that defy explanation. These challenge our understanding of what is possible. Local residents have learned to live with the highway's unusual character. Many accept the supernatural activity as a fact of life, no more surprising than harsh weather or difficult terrain. They share warnings and advice about safe travel practices, much as their ancestors shared knowledge about dangerous animals or treacherous river crossings. Gas station attendants along the route often keep maps showing alternate roads for nervous travelers. Some post signs warning about the highway's reputation. Local mechanics report unusually high rates of unexplained electronic failures in vehicles that regularly travel Highway 491. Truck drivers who regularly haul freight along the route have developed their own informal protocols for dealing with supernatural encounters. Many carry protective items suggested by Navajo traditions. Others travel in convoys to avoid being alone on the highway after dark. Travel guides and tourism websites now mention the highway's paranormal reputation alongside its historical significance and scenic beauty. Some visitors come specifically because of the supernatural associations. They hope to add their own experiences to the growing collection of unexplained encounters. The Navajo Nation has established a cultural center near the highway that explains traditional beliefs about the area. Visitors can learn about skinwalker traditions and the spiritual significance of the landscape. The center also provides protective items and advice for those who wish to travel the highway respectfully. The stories continue to accumulate, each adding new details to the evolving legend of America's most haunted highway. Whether these experiences represent genuine supernatural phenomena, unknown natural forces, or complex psychological effects, they have created a lasting mythology. This shows no signs of fading. Recent reports continue to follow the same patterns established over decades. Phantom vehicles that pace travelers for miles before vanishing, shadow figures that dart across the road just beyond the reach of headlights, ghostly hitchhikers who provide specific directions before disappearing from vehicles. In 2021, a family driving from Arizona to Colorado reported an encounter that followed the classic pattern. They were followed by a black sedan for over 30 miles. The car maintained an exact distance behind them, despite changes in speed and direction. When they pulled into a rest area, the following vehicle parked behind them, but contained no visible occupants. When they returned from the restroom, both their car and the phantom vehicle were gone. They found their car in the parking lot of a gas station 20 miles away, with the keys in the ignition and no memory of how they got there. Highway 491 remains a place where the familiar rules of everyday reality seem suspended. It exists at the intersection of the known and unknown. Here, travelers must confront possibilities that their rational minds struggle to accept. The road stretches through the high desert, under vast skies. It carries its secrets into an uncertain future. Whatever forces shaped its supernatural reputation continue to influence the experiences of those who drive its length. This ensures that the legend of America's haunted highway will persist for generations to come. For now, the questions remain unanswered. The phenomena continue, and somewhere along that lonely stretch of asphalt, between the ancient red rocks and the endless sky, the impossible still happens every night. The highway patrol continues to respond to calls about abandoned vehicles and missing persons. Local hospitals treat patients who arrive disoriented and confused, claiming they lost hours or days while driving Highway 491. Search and rescue teams still comb the desert looking for people who vanished from their cars without explanation. Each incident adds to the growing file of unexplained events along America's most haunted highway. The reports come from all types of people: long-haul truckers with decades of experience, families on vacation, business travelers, and local residents. Their stories share common elements that suggest a genuine phenomenon beyond conventional understanding. Whatever the truth behind Highway 491, one thing remains certain: the road continues to challenge our assumptions about reality. It forces us to consider that there may be more to the world than our scientific instruments can measure. In a landscape where ancient traditions speak of spirits and modern travelers report impossible encounters, the boundaries between the possible and impossible become blurred. The highway stretches on through the desert night, its asphalt surface unchanged by the strange events that occur along its path. Mile after mile, it carries both ordinary traffic and extraordinary mysteries, a testament to the enduring power of the unknown in our increasingly mapped and measured world. Don't forget to share your own highway ghost stories in the comments below. And if you're interested in more tales of American mysteries, make sure to subscribe for new videos every week.